Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Meiser Sheni, Pedig Beis, Halacha Beis, and God willing, starting at least Halacha Gimel. We're learning today Daf Yud Zayin, and we left off on Daf Yud Zayin, Amud Aleph, all the way on top of the Amid by the brackets, Tilson, Shal Meiser Sheni. So the first topic we will have today is we're going to be referring back to the Mishnah, to Halacha Beis. The Mishnah is discussing both Tilson and Karshinim. Tilson, fenugreek, as we began explaining, like bitter vetch, like karshinim, on one hand, biblically, b'chlal, they don't have to be tithed because they are primarily used for animal fodder. Michael behema is not included in the whole category of trumas u'maisros, but since during famine, b'diavad, b'doichak, people manage to eat these products, and they actually do if there's no other option, so rabbinically, they have to be tithed. In other words, they're only, in our case, Meiser Sheni Midrabanan. And because of that, the Mishnah began sharing two leniencies. First leniency was that Tilson, Te'achel Tzimchoinim. As we will clarify what that means, Te'achel Tzimchoinim doesn't mean that you have to eat them when they're very young. It means that you may harvest them even prior to them developing seeds, even though people would use fenugreek for its seeds. One would argue that la'achla v'loy lahefsed, you may not even harvest it prior to the plant reaching that stage. Again, since it's only midrabanan, now what are we talking about? How is it b'chlal meiser sheni? We have to add another detail. We're speaking about a person who took seeds of already tilsoned meiser sheni and planted them. And here we have the rule that gedule here, Meiser Sheni is Meiser Sheni, so it's growing Meiser Sheni. If it would have been Meiser Sheni midda oiraisa, then you would not allow to harvest them prior to them developing seeds. But yes, you may do that. And then the Mishnah went on to speak about a machlokes Beishamai and Beisilel, how far or how little effort must we make not to contaminate, not to be metame the tilsa. Now, generally, Meiser Sheni, if it would be Meiser Sheni midoraisa, may never be made tame. However, we are more lenient by tilsa. We're going to actually read the Mishnah again, Beishamai Beisilol. We're going to see that there are actually two girsois in the words of this machlokes tanoim with a little bit of a nuance. There's a nafkamina between what girsa, and from there the Gemara is going to refer back to the second topic in the Mishnah, to the karshinim. Karshinim also has leniencies. Number one, te'achel simchainim. Number two, the Mishnah says that karshinim are allowed to be taken out of Yerushalmi. Really, we'll see, it's a subject to a machlokes, but we began with the premise that any Meiser Sheni product that already entered the holy city, the words of Chazal is mechitza toifastoi, that the mechitzas of Yerushalayim took hold of it, which would mean you cannot take it out of Yerushalayim. The Mishnah says that karshinim are allowed to be taken out of Yerushalayim, and the Gemara is going to limit that leniency, as we'll explain why b'chlal would someone want to take it out of Yerushalayim. One thing is for sure, it may never be consumed outside Yerushalayim. So we have to just clarify, a person is taking it out because he doesn't have where to store it. That's not enough of a reason. We'll see in the Gemara about that. And the Mishnah also had a machlokes regarding karshinim that became tamei. The machlokes between Rabbi Tarfon and the Chachamim. Rabbi Tarfon says that it may not be redeemed. The Chachamim say that it may be redeemed. And the Gemara is going to introduce that what's underlying that machlokes. We spoke it out yesterday, that Rabbi Tarfon applies the rule ein poidim kachim lahachilam leklavim to the case of karshinim, and the Chachamim, who agree with the general rule that ein poidim kachim lahachilam leklavim, find that rule irrelevant, as the Gemara will explain, when it comes to our karshinim. That will be more or less the sugya up until halacha gimel. And today's daf Yud Zayin Amid Beis, we're going to begin the third Mishnah of this Perek, and the third Mishnah of this Perek is going to begin speaking about coins of Meiser Sheni and coins of Chulin that got mixed up, got mingled, and they fell down on the ground, and now you have a person that's gathering them. And there's going to be two different formulas how to determine which coins that you gather will be Meiser Sheni, which ones will be Chulin. And that, in the Mishnah, the way the Mishnah presents it, that will depend as to how you're gathering it. Whether you are gathering it by one, that's called Likita, picking up a coin, picking up another coin, picking up a third coin, or whether you are gathering it ba'oifen of bila. Bila would means that you scoop them up, which means that you gather many coins at one time. In the Mishnah, this will be the differentiation. One formula by Lakita, another formula by Bila, and then, God willing, tomorrow, we're going to further elaborate the rationale behind these two different formulas. This is today's daf, Chevra daf Yud Zayin, Amud Aleph, all the way on top of the Amud. So this is all the response that the Rabbi Shimon is giving to the Chachamim. We're not going to go through the response, but he brings into our topic, Tilson Shal Meiser Sheni, and the Mishnah says, again, the words of the Mishnah is, Tei Ochel Simchoinim. They may be eaten, or they have to be eaten when they're very young, which means that if you planted seeds of Tilson Meiser Sheni, because of the rule that Gedulei Truma Truma applied to Meiser Sheni, Gedulei Meiser Sheni, again, either you are even allowed to harvest it young. Why would you do that? Because you want to eat the leaves, even though most people don't eat it that way. Even though when you harvest it, chaval, leave it in the ground and let it develop seeds. Then you'll have leaves and seeds. This guy says, I want to eat it now for lunch. So either you may or you have to. That's the first clarification the Gemara is going to give. So Taichas the Gemara, you're not required to harvest it young. That would make no sense. That Keni mas nisa. The pshat, the correct understanding of the Mishnah is not that you're chayiv to eat it simchainim, but that you are allowed. Muteres lehei ochel simchainim. Look inside the top Maharafulda. Koloimer lav lememra dafke tzarich loichlam simchainim. Don't misread the Mishnah. Teyachal simchainim could have been interpreted, you have to harvest it right away, ASAP. No. Ela muter leheyachal simchainim, as we just spoke out. I'm going back to the Mishnah just to read the words and to appreciate the nuance of the next shtickle Gemara. So the Mishnah writes like this, because now Rab Shimon went on to show Bechlal Karshinim were lenient. And because of the leniencies, now we're going to go Truma, Meiser Sheni. Don't forget, we began with the premise that Truma generally is more chomer than Meiser Sheni. Why? Because Truma is Asur Lizarim. Meiser Sheni is Muter Lizarim. Even though Truma can be eaten anywhere and Meiser Sheni only on Yerushalmi, we still view generally Truma is considered more chomer. Nevertheless, shows Rab Shimon that sometimes we're more lenient by Truma and we're more machmer by Meiser Sheni. So he began by Karshinim. Now here we're speaking about the behavior that one must take to guard the sanctity of Truma, which is a positive commandment, right? We have to be shomer. The words are escaping me. God says guard, shmira. Shmira means not to make it tummy. So I'm reading inside the Mishnah. Vishal Truma, Beishama Yoimrim, Kol Maseo B'Torah, and a Chanami. Whenever you prepare the tilson, we're talking about tilson, slicha, that the tilson has to be prepared b'Torah. Don't say since it's only midrabanan and since teyachol simchainim, we don't care. We do care. But there's one thing: people would turn tilson into shampoo. Once it's turned into shampoo, to tell a person that you have to, if you're tummy, you can't use it. And even if you're tired, you have to wash until Shadayim. At kedei kach, we don't say. Even Beishamai says that chutz michafifas, at least over there, you could, which by the way is a leniency. It just shows you it's all because it's Meiser Sheni, only midrabanan. I want to say something else about the Tilson shampoo. It doesn't mean that once you turned it into shampoo, it's not the Meiser Sheni. You cannot take it out of Yerushalmi. We don't say that. We say that you don't have to care about Tum and Tara. That's what we say. And I'm reading the words in our Mishnah. No, that since it's midrabanan, even though it's Truma, by the way, Truma is not about you, it's about Tara. So I take back my Yerushalayim. The same thing would be with Meiser Sheni. It's Kol Masel Betuma, but there's one step that you cannot do if you are in a state of Tuma. There is one step that you have to wash Natilas Yadayim prior to doing it, and that is that the soaking, the putting the tilson seeds into water, when your mamish put it into water, everyone knows that water is machshir something. Not only that, if I didn't wash Natilas Yadayim and I put any edible into water, I will right away make a tummy. Why? Because it became mukhshir and now it's becoming tummy. So Beis Hillel holds that the kol masel betuma, it's not, like who said Marasayan Kaven. You don't see it. Here you're putting it into the water. That already Beis Hillel holds has to be done in the state of Tara, which would mean you have to be Tahar and you have to wash until Yudayim. These are the words of the Mishnah. Says our Gemara, Beis Hillel, chutz mishiri yasa. These are the words that we just read. Shiri yasa means soaking it. Now, really, the step of the processing of the tilson in the soaking really is two. There are two subsections of soaking. You know what they are? Putting them into the water, taking them out of the water. And shiriyasa refers to putting them into the water. What would be the logical difference between them? You can say nothing. You can say chilik. Again, Beis Hillel is allowing you to touch it betuma. So we see that we're not so careful when it comes to tilson. It's going to be given to animals. It's only b'chlal midrabanan. Elama, one step, be careful. To remember it's meiser, it's truma, which means by truma, a zor should not use it. Okay, so says the Gemara, from the way our Mishnah, the way Rabbeinu HaKadosh quoted the words of Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, what would be the difference between them? Amar Rabbi Yoina, I'll tell you. Shoyla benem. The word shoyla is taking something out of the sea, right? I don't know if that's modern Hebrew, but they have many psukim like that, right? When you're fishing, you're shoyla min hayam. When you take, Yakir is shaking his head, even though we can't hear you, but you're happy. Good. So taking it out. In other words, Beis Shammai.
In Hebrew we say shliyat dagim.
Shliyas dagin otazoi. So Beis Shammai holds when he says that kol masel betara chutz michafifasa shoyla biyodayim taharis. Just like when you put it into the vat to soak, you have to make sure that there's tahara. You're tahar and you wash netilas yadayim. When you take it out, what's the difference? You're taking it out of the water. However, the fact that our girsa has the words that Beis Shammai yoimrim, that kol masel betuma chutz mishiriyasa, shiriyasa is the only area putting it in. But shoyla biyadayim tameis, when you take it out, you can take it out with tamei hands. It's almost like the Chachamim were geyser that there's only one step you have to do betara to remember it's truma midrabanan, to remember that a zor should not use it. It's like a reminder. Says the Gemara, very nice, if the version of the Mishnah is accurate, but we should know that Tanei, we learned in a Braisa, a whole different version of Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Now, the Gemara, when it begins by quoting Zu Divrei Rabbi Meir, stam for curiosity. What does Rav Meir say? The Gemara doesn't quote the whole Braisa, the whole Tosefta, but you can look inside the Pnei Moshe just to know what Bechlal Rav Meir has a whole different shita. It's gavaldik, almost the opposite. So this is mamash on the top. I'll begin 3 lines from the top in the Pnei Moshe, and he's quoting something that we're going to have later in the Gemara. The Gemara later quotes the whole Braisa, even though what's negeya to our Gemara is Rabbi Yehuda's version of Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, not the way Rabbi wrote it in the Mishnah. But what's Divrei Rabbi Meir? Beis Shammai yoimrim kol masel betara. Now you know what the difference between this and our Mishnah is. Our Mishnah says chutz michafifasa. At least according to Beis Shammai, if it's already shampoo, you can use it. Gesund hate. No, according to Rabbi Meir, according to Beis Shammai, even if you're shampooing your hair, you got to do it betara. So in other words, legirsas Rabbi Meir Beis Shammai is even more machmer. Beis Hillel loimrim kol masel betuma chutz michafifasa. In other words, what we have in our Mishnah, shitas Beis Shammai, according to Rabbi Meir, that was shitas Beis Hillel. Stop to know. Now I'll go right back in the Gemara. Here is the key. Avol Rabbi Yehuda oimer. Rabbi Yehuda holds Beis Shammai yoimrim. The Beis Shammai of Rabbi Yehuda is like our Mishnahs. Kol masel betara chutz michafifasa. Rabbi Yehuda's version of Beis Shammai is Rabbi Meir versions of Beis Hillel. Fine. But to Beis Hillel loimrim kol masel betuma chutz mishiliyasa. Here you go. It's our Mishnah says chutz mishiriyasa. Our Mishnah says Beis Hillel holds that you can do everything betuma. When you put it in the water, make sure everything is starred. No. This version is that when you take it out, you have to do it betara. Now, you know what the Gemara is really saying? According to the Girsa Chutz Mishiliyasa, it means both Shiriyasa and Shiliyasa. In other words, why? Because it's the same thing. You can argue. I see why it's the same thing. You see the water, both when you put it in and when you take it out, you have to do it betara. Now, if according to Beis Hillel, you have to do it betara both in and out, so where exactly will Beis Hillel allow you to do it betuma? Where would that be? My b'neiim, Amarav Matanya, Migina b'neim. After they would soak it, they would be shoyre it, then they would be shoyle it. That's Yiddish lashon hakodesh. After that, the next step would be they would crush it. That's the Megina. They would crush it, and when they would crush it, Vlad, there's details. They would remove the shells. We're learning all these things, and then they would have the powder of the tilson. I know that today it's a supplement. Maybe it's a spice. I don't know exactly how often these have so many mishnayos about tilson. So these are the steps. In other words, after they finish soaking it, according to Beis Hillel, when you're going to be Megina it, Beis Shammai Omrim, the only time you can do it betuma is when it's already shampoo. But when you're processing it, even when you are crushing it or rubbing it, according to Beis Shammai, it has to be done betara. Beis Hillel will hold, even according to the version of Rabbi Yehuda, that Beis Shammai Omrim moigig b'yadayim tohiros. Beis Hillel Omrim, you can be moigig b'yadayim tomeos. Okay, in other words, just to know that there is a machlokes, our Mishnah, and the Braisa, Ledivrei Rabbi Yehuda, what is the shita of Beis Hillel? According to the Mishnah, only putting it into the water has to be done b'yadayim tohiros. According to the Rabbi Yehuda's version, putting it in and taking it out has to be done b'yadayim tohiros. Okay, and next shtickle. So then the Mishnah says that now, and from there we moved on, and then the whole Rab Shimon pointed out that all of these leniencies are only by truma. Meiser Sheni, Tilson, all of it has to be done betaro. All of it. Meiser Sheni is more chamer than truma. Then the Mishnah went on, Rab Shimon went on to speak about the karshinim, bitter vetch, and again, like the Mishnah said by Tilson, first to show you how b'chlal we are lenient, teyachol simchainim, same rule of Tilson, the same rule by karshinim, and then the Mishnah wrote another leniency. What will be the other leniency? The words of the Mishnah are v'nechnasim li Yerushalayim. The Gemara doesn't quote the Iker. V'yoitzin. And what's the chiddush? Repeat what we said yesterday. Our Mishnah is going according to those who hold that any product of Meiser Sheni that entered Yerushalayim, we apply the rule of mechitza toifastoi. Once it was gathered by the walls, it may never be removed. It's there to be eaten there. Period. And we're lenient that we say by karshinim, you're allowed to take it out. Now, when you read the Mishnah, what do you think? Stam, take it out. L'mashal, I'm going to Yerushalayim 3 times a year. A yid, that would be the minimum to be oile regel. And I have with me seeds of karshinim. And whatever I didn't finish this time, I don't know if they stay fresh. I'm assuming the seeds, let's say they stay fresh. So you take it out, go back home, and when you come back a few months later, bring it back. Says the Gemara, that's not what the Mishnah is saying. To take it back home is something that even though karshinim is only Meiser Sheni midrabanan, you may not take it out of Yerushalayim stam. You're taking it out of Yerushalayim, I'll say it by heart, is because the karshinim were made into doughs, were baked into breads. I don't know if these were breads for animals. I don't know if these were breads for people. And any processing that is done in Yerushalayim is a bit more expensive than having the same procedure done outside Yerushalayim. It makes so much sense. It doesn't even have to be explained. The Yerushalmis consider what they do to be superior to everyone else. So of course they charge more money. So if I'm in Yerushalayim and I want to give, let's say the karshinim, the ikar use was for the animals. And no, not dogs, the way the culture today. You have karbanas, you have the shepsalach, you have a lamb. You want to feed your lamb good food before you shecht it. But you want to bake it into bread. For that, you can take it out. You know, you're taking it out to make it food, to take it back in. That's where you're allowed to do it. Other items, you can't even do that. You got to pay the Yerushalmis. You got to bake it in Yerushalayim. The ovens there were special. Okay, so says the Gemara, when are you allowed the yotzim? Kedei lasois isa v'lachsor. Kedei lasois isa v'lachsor. That's the pshat. In other words, not that you can take it back home. This is very important. And the way he writes in the bottom, the Marafulda writes this. almost the same thing. He doesn't knock the Yerushalmi. He just speaks about how it's cheaper, right? That if you want to take it out, for sure not. You want to take it out to redeem it. Of course, you can't do that because the hakaimelon mechitza likloit derabanan, even though it's a rabbinic law. Yeah, and you can argue that karshinim is only rabbinic ma'aser sheni. It's not like exeda ligzeda. It has nothing to do one with the other. Ella yoitzim lipa ella yoitzim pshat lipa amim. There are times. Stama always. Yesh tanurim chutz leir bezoil. Outside the city walls, the ovens outside were cheaper. V'ye'afa oisam b'chutz and v'yachziram kama pa'amim. That's why the Gemara repeats it twice. Take it out, you can bring it in. Take it out, you can bring it in. Why don't you leave it at home? Why are you taking it back and forth? Because your host is a ganif. You don't trust him. I don't know. It's funny. You're taking it out. You're taking it in. You're walking around with your karshinim seeds. All right. Beautiful.
Where you couldn't take it out, but you have to bring it back in to eat it.
No, we did not. No, we did not. If you took it, we learned if you redeemed it outside, if you bought animals outside, if you took it outside, you have to bring it back in for sure. But the rule is, yeah. But now you should know that really there's a machlokes tanoim about that. Look, so says the Gemara on Daf Yud Zayin Amid Beis, turning to Amid. The Gemara understands in the beginning that this is not an exception that was made for Karshinim, that maybe our Mishnah follows the Tana that holds what you're saying, Vlad. You can't eat it outside. You can't take it outside once it was in and redeem it outside, but to take it out, to bring it in, gesundheit hate. So the Gemara says, L'choira, you can say that maybe our Mishnah is following the Rashbag, is following the Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, the Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Loimar. Afa Peres Nachlasim v'Yotzim. No, says the Gemara, that's not the Chiddush. If not, why would the Mishnah write it? The Mishnah is trying to show you first that we are b'chlal lenient by Karshinim. Just like Te'ochel Simchoinim is only because it's Ma'aser Sheni Midrabanan. Same thing by the Karshinim, it's Ma'aser Sheni Midrabanan. That you can be yoitzen from Yerushalmi is divrei ha'koili. In other words, really, our Mishnah subscribes to the Chachamim who argue with Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. The Chachamim hold that mechitza toifastoi, you're not allowed to remove product once it had entered outside. Eloma hacha kalu shekelu b'karshinim, because karshinim to begin with is only rabbinic ma'aser sheni because it's really primarily used to feed to animals. Okay. Now the Gemara is moving on. For some reason, it doesn't even bring in a bracket the machlokes Rabbi Tarfon and the Chachamim. The next case in the Mishnah is what happens if the karshinim became tamei. And normally, again, the rule normally is if ma'aser sheni becomes tamei vlad, then you can redeem it. Even in Yerushalmi, if it's tamei, you can't eat it, but you're not going to have it ruined. Here, there's a problem. The problem is that it's animal food. So think about it. If you're going to redeem it, what will you do with it? The words of Chazal is you'll give it to your dogs. It doesn't matter if you're giving it to a dog, which is a non-kosher animal, if you're giving it to a sheep. Point is that by kachim we say that if the whole purpose of redeeming kachim is to feed it to animals, it's a degradation, it's a bizoyin. That's the way we learn pshat. So therefore, Rabbi Tarfon will hold you can't redeem it. Now, if you can't redeem it, what are you going to do with it? It's ma'aser sheni. You cannot eat it the tumah. So he had a big chiddush, a big leniency, only because it's ma'aser sheni midarabanan. What's the leniency? Number one, make sure that it doesn't spread its tumah. So what do? You take pieces of this karshinim that's tamei. You can make it into a dough. This dough is tamei. But break off from this dough little pieces. Each piece should be less than a kibetza. Therefore, it's unable to be mitamei. It doesn't convey tumah. People who make loaves out of karshinim, they don't begin with the less than a kibetza. They use a bigger piece. Mix it in with a bigger piece of a dough of karshinim that's tahar. And there is a rule, midoiraisa, that their bittul beroiv and our sugya will go even for tumah, even though in the previous Masechta we learned lav dafka. But we are saying here that so the tumah will be nullified, and now the whole thing became tahar. That's because it's only midrabanan, and that's because you can't redeem it. If you can't redeem it, it's time to throw it out. We have to find an eitzah. The Chachamim disagree with Rab Tarfon. The Chachamim hold you can redeem it. Don't do shtick and then make little pieces and then be mavatal lechatchila. Redeem it. So says the Gemara. First, we're quoting.
Rabbi,
Yes.
if you're redeeming it and now
Yes.
you have money, you don't have to use that on new fenugreek or new whatever it is.
You can
new
use
veg,
it on
right?
any produce, and that produce will be imbued with Kedushas Meiser Sheni. You're right.
Yeah.
Okay. Now the Gemara is going to limit Rab Tarfon's leniency. We don't say that now that he's allowing me to be mevatalit, he's not saying that I can mix this less than the kabetza, karshinim dough, into other types of doughs, which is mastama what all of the manufacturers do today. When they tell you 100% pure orange juice, mastama it's not. In other words, you can only mix it into a dough of karshinim. Not only that, you can argue if I'm allowed to be mevatalit, let me be mevatalit in chulin. Adarabba, then I'll resolve the problem of Meiser Sheni with its restrictions that you can't do either. In other words, the Gemara is going to say that even according to Rab Tarfon, you need to have two conditions which will allow you to do what he says you can do. Number one is ubelvad be'isa shal karshinim. You have to mix it into a dough of its like. Ironically, min b'minoi, according to Rabbi Yehuda, is in a bottle. But we're not saying that over here. And number two, ubelvad isa shal meiser sheni. You're not allowed to do a bittul in a way that you are removing the kedusha of meiser sheni. The whole mahalach of Rab Tarfon is for you to salvage the meiser sheni, for you to be able to use the meiser sheni as meiser sheni. So don't go and do shtick now and get it out of the kedusha of meiser sheni. Says the Gemara, Rab Gur Yoin, b'shem Rabbi Yossi ben Chanina. Divrei Rabbi Tarfon, what's the rationale? Why doesn't Rabbi Tarfon just allow you to redeem it? Because normally Meiser Sheni that becomes Tomei is redeemable because of the rule, all based on the fact that Karshinim is primarily Michael Behema. So when you redeem it, again, all these doughs is to make them into breads for animals. So that's why you got a problem, because he applies this expression of reverence for kachim even also to Meiser Sheni. Says the Gemara. Yes, no problem.
So what's the difference? Either way, it's going to put the animal.
Because you're not redeeming it. You're not redeeming it. You're using it as is. That's the difference. You got it? No, as is, really midoraisa, you don't. It's not Meiser Sheni. The Chachamim said, no, you got to make it into more. But once it's Meiser Sheni, use it as is. You can give it to animals. But if it's tamei and you're redeeming it, now what? So let's say you're going to buy with money other animal food. But what are you going to do with this? Give it to your animals. So to redeem something, to give it to your animals, we don't do.
Why did he just say you could redeem it, but you have to then consume it as a human and not give it to animals?
That's okay. So both what the Gabai and what Aviv is saying, I'm telling you, the Gemara is addressing it from the best angle. In other words, the Chachamim argue with Rab Tarfon. So when we learn the Mishnah, you can think that the Chachamim hold that you could be poida kachim lahachilim leklavim. No, they don't. No, they don't. You would think that maybe the Chachamim hold that you don't say it by Meiser Sheni. Yes, they do. The Chachamim are moide by Meiser Sheni. Ein poidim Meiser Sheni lahachilim leklavim. Why are they lenient? I'll say the words of the Gemara. Because when do we say ein poidim es hakachim lahachilim leklavim? If when it was in the state of tarot was Michael Adam, and now that you're going to redeem it, you're going to degrade it into Michael Behema, so you're bringing it down a notch, based on the premise that animals are not people. That's a chiddush here in LA. But if lechatchila it was Michael Behema, that's basically what you guys are saying. Karshinim to begin with was animal food. So what? If you're going to redeem it, you're going to give it to animals. You didn't schlep it down. You're doing with it what you would have done with it betara. That's what you were saying of it. That's why the Chachamim hold it's not a problem. Let's read it inside. Amar Rabbi Yoina, that niruk dvarim, the way we should understand the pshat and the Chachamim, let me tell you what he's saying you shouldn't say. Don't say the Chachamim hold that we don't apply ein poidem es hakachim lahachilim leklavim to Meiser Sheni. They do apply it. They do apply it. So why would they be lenient? Because only something that prior to its pidyon was ra'oi lo oichel adam, And for whatever reason, now it's in a state where it's no longer royal achilas adam, and therefore the whole purpose of redeeming it would be now to give it to animals. Then we say we don't do that. Ein poiden oisem loichel behema. But that, according to the Chachamim, is irrelevant by karshinim. Why? Because karshinim to begin with was animal food. Means what's karshinim? Karshinim was designated to give it to animals. What do I care if I redeem it? I give it to animals. The only difference will be is prior it was Meiser Sheni, so I needed to feed it to animals in Yerushalayim. If you redeem it, it becomes chulin, so you can feed it to animals in Yerushalayim, outside Yerushalayim. But you're not degrading it. Degrading it means taking it down. It's already down. That's why they say you can do it. Okay. Now, the next piece of the Gemara, it can be learned in many different ways, and we are going to learn that this is going to be a kasha on Rab Tarfon. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yitzchak bar Eliyashiv Boi, that, let me just say the following. The words of the Mishnah is that nitmu means it became tamei in Yerushalayim. There you are allowed tamei. Rab Tarfon says the whole procedure. Break it into little pieces and be mavatalit, like we said, in karshinim, for meiser sheni, and then salve it that way. What does that? It being tamei or tar, where is it relevant, Aviv? Tumantara, only when it's in Yerushalayim. Outside Yerushalayim, it b'chlal cannot be used. It cannot be used. Why not? Not because it's tamei, even if it's tar, because meiser sheni cannot be consumed outside Yerushalayim. So I have a kasha. Outside Yerushalayim, would you be allowed to do the same thing? Would you be allowed to do the same thing, which is break it into little pieces, be mevatalit? So only so according the tumantara issue is only on Yerushalayim. What does that imply? That if nitmu bigvulin, if the tuma came up bigvulin, even according to Rab Tarfon, lo yipadu, l'chayra, that should be the din. Why not? Because she'ein poidem esakachim lachilim liklavim. So why wouldn't Rab Tarfon say the same thing even outside Yerushalayim? That's the Gemara's kasha. In the Mishnah, we didn't have the words of ein poidem esakachim lachilim liklavim. That was the chiddush. I know we said it, but that was the chiddush of our Gemara. That's the reason behind Rab Tarfon. If that's the reason behind Rab Tarfon, asks the Gemara, why would we differentiate between in Yerushalayim and outside Yerushalayim? Look inside the Pnei Moshe, 2 lines into the medium lines. Rabbi Yitzchak bar Eliyashiv Boi, al ha de Rabbi Yoina, de lamai de ka amart, ali be de Rabbanon, im kein shmamina, right? The Chachamim hold that you are allowed to redeem it. You are allowed to redeem it. L'choyre, that would mean that Rab Tarfon argues with that. Rab Tarfon holds that something, even though to begin with it's Michael Behema, even though lechatchila it's Michael Behema, still he holds ein poidem, right? The Rab Tarfon ipchuhu, the ilu mikiven she'einu ru'oim lachilas adam kol kach ein poidem oisai. Nevertheless, Rab Tarfon holds, still you can't redeem it. If you're redeeming it, it has to be only for people. Ma'ato, the logic should be that even if nitmu bigvulim, according to Rab Tarfon, gam kein lo yipada oisam le Rab Tarfon, she'ein podem esakachim lachilam leklavim. Now, you can argue, who says Rab Tarfon says you can't? That's the way we understand. When the Mishnah is speaking about, right, the Mishnah first began that if it's in Yerushalayim, you can take it out. If it became tummy, the Mishnah is mashma that when can you do the leniency? Only in Yerushalayim. Why? If it became tummy outside Yerushalayim, let's use the same region. Ein poidem esakachim lachilam leklavim. And once you can't redeem it, if you can't redeem it, then Rab Tarfon allows you to do this bittul lechatchila. Why would it be machalik? That's a great question. And Amar Rabbi Yoina min hakotza el hakotza, how to learn. The Marafulda teaches the words. This is a very interesting Talmudic expression, and that is v'han nute nutume. Ooh, this is a good kasha, which means this is a checkmate, which means that the Rabbi Yoina is saying that one cannot use the rationale under Rab Tarfon of Ein Poidem Es HaKochim La'achil Meklovim, because if that would have been the reason, Rab Tarfon would have said it no matter where it became Tamei. Rabbi Yoina says that Rab Tarfon only allowed you to use it in Yerushalayim. In other words, your kasha is great. I don't have an answer. Really, I don't know why Rab Tarfon Bechlal says that you can do what you can do. The reason what we gave is not good. That's the way, clearly. I'm reading the Marafulda. 14 lines from the top, like a middle. Kushya gedoyle v'chazaki. And nutei nutumei loshoin roish lasapanim. I don't know what that means. It's some sort of expression. What's the roish lasapanim? The head sailor. It's a borrowed expression that's used. If you have a gavaldik akasha, you say nutei nutumei. Okay. Now the Pnei Moshe says nutei nutumei is miloshin tuma. Look inside the Pnei Moshe 2 lines in the widest line. It's an expression of, it's a humorous expression. My hide in the tume Marta. Why are you asking kashas about tuma? Of course, according to Rab Tarfon, if it becomes tamei even outside Yerushalayim, you can do the same thing that he says you can do. Of course you can do it. That's what Rabbi Yoina is saying, which is, you're not allowed to redeem it. The thing to begin with is only Michael Behema. I don't care. You can't redeem kachim or ma'aser sheni if you're going to give it to animals. Period. So what should you do? Break it into small pieces, less than a kibetza, bima vatalit lechatchila, and then you're good to go. Yes, Rab Tarfon says the same things, bein inside, bein outside. So why did the Mishnah present Rab Tarfon regarding inside Yerushalayim? Answers Rabbi Yoina, not to tell you the opinion of Rab Tarfon, but to tell you the leniency of the Rabbanon. Let's read inside the Pnei Moshe. The Maide Boyaloch, Vaday Hachu. That what? Aliba de Rab Tarfon, the Kosavar, Hoyel vi Koren Lamachel Behema, still ain't poiden oisam. You're right. According to Rab Tarfon, Loishna be Yerushalayim, Loishna be Gvulin. According to the Pnei Moshe, there was not a girsa. It became Tamei in Yerushalayim, not to tell you the leniency of Rab Tarfon, but to tell you the chiddush of the Chachamim. That what? That even in Yerushalayim, im nitmu poiden oisam kedin shar meiser shenitma shepoiden oisam afilu be Yerushalayim. Don't forget, my friends, b'chlal, redeeming meiser sheni. That's what Vlad was saying before. Forget about Tuma. Redeeming Ma'aser Sheni is an instrument that is done outside Yerushalayim as a rule. Once you bring the Ma'aser Sheni in Yerushalayim, B'chlal, you cannot redeem it. Now, we're speaking about something unusual. If the Ma'aser Sheni became Tamei, then you can redeem it even in Yerushalayim. But just remember that generally the concept of Pidyon is not Shaykh to Yerushalayim. Now, the Chachamim are allowing you to redeem it, even though you're feeding it to animals. Why Aviv? Because anyways, it was animal food. So the Mishnah presented this machloikes in Yerushalayim, la'ashmeinan, the chiddush of the Chachamim, that even in Yerushalayim, normally you can't be paid the things in Yerushalayim, but it became Tama, you could be paid it in Yerushalayim. But a vadai, outside Yerushalayim, l'chachamim, you can be paid it, and vadai, l'Rab Tarfon, even outside Yerushalayim, you're not allowed to redeem it, because of ein paidem es hakoshem la'achil maklav. Beautiful. And the word tuma comes from the word tuma. Tuma, you're asking tuma. Both in and out is the same. Beautiful. Okay. Now we're moving on to taroivis. Right? We have hilchas taroivis all over Shas. And the Mishnah will begin speaking about coins, even though we will see, according to the Rash Sirilio, that the same exact will be regarding grains of Ma'aser Sheni, but let's begin with the case of the Mishnah. Let me just give numbers. It's a very easy formula. Let's say that a person had 100 coins of Ma'aser Sheni. You have 100 coins of Ma'aser Sheni money. You have 200 coins chulin money. I'm just giving an example where you have a third Ma'aser Sheni. That will be the case, and 2/3 chulin. And what happened is that when you had them contained, people had different wallets. You had a Ma'aser Sheni wallet, you had a chulin wallet, and they spilled on the floor. Now they're farmished. Now, they have to remember one thing, that Ma'aser Sheni money, we already had this before. If there is a need, we learned this regarding if someone bought something that they shouldn't have bought. According to Rashi in Kedushin, we says, you take money, and you can say wherever the coins of Ma'aser Sheni are, You're redeeming it on these coins. In other words, I want to just say that you don't have to find the original coins of Meiser Sheni. It's not like kosher and treif. If you took out the treif chicken, you can't eat treif. If I took out chulin coins, I can say wherever the Meiser Sheni is, it goes on the chulin. There is such an option. We'll see when do we and when do we not say that. So case number one, mois chulin or mois Meiser Sheni. And guys, use my example where you have 1/3 Meiser Sheni and you have 2/3 chulin. You have a total of 300 coins. Okay? And shenis barzel, that they were scattered on the ground. And again, if you can differentiate, that's not called mixed. It's that you don't know which is which. You don't know which coin is Meiser Sheni, which one is chulin. So like we said in the introduction, this is the key of the Mishnah. The halacha will be determined on how physically did you gather them. Option number one is for you to be malakate, which means in our Mishnah, you pick them up one at a time. Picked up one, you picked up one, you picked up one, you picked up one, and I'll go more. The case will be that at the end of the picking up, you have 270. I'm going to use these simple numbers because you're missing 30. If it would be proportionate, it's easy, 10, 20. But in this case, if you pick up one at a time, Aviv, you know what you say? Everyone that you picked up, you had 100 coins of Meiser Sheni. The first 100 coins that you're picking up will become Meiser Sheni. Not because you're going to say they were Meiser Sheni. How do you know? But like we mentioned, you can make a declaration that wherever the Meiser Sheni coins are, I'm redeeming it. I'm putting its kedusha in these 100. But the bottom line is that I will end up with 100 coins of Meiser Sheni. And if I only picked up another 170, that means if I had a total of 270, which coins were the coins that were lost? The chulin coins. That's a chumrah. That's the first case in the Mishnah. Uh-huh. When do we say you cannot redeem Meiser Sheni? Produce of Meiser Sheni cannot be redeemed. Coins of Meiser Sheni, if there is a need, could be redeemed. That's again going back to what we had last week or 2 weeks ago. Rashi Bavli Kedushin Daf Nun Vav that says that if a person purchased with Mois Meiser Sheni something that they were not allowed to purchase, that was the case. And what's the problem with that, Aviv? That if the purchase was illegal, halachically illegal, that the kedusha remained on the coins. So the guy who sold the animal has coins that's Meiser Sheni. He doesn't know that. So when the Mishnah says Ye'ochel Kenegdon Taichas Rashi, what does that mean? Let's say it was $100 that the buyer who did the wrong takes $100 chulin and he says that the moicher has in his pocket wherever he is $100. He says that in Yerushalmi the kedusha of that goes into this. Okay. So ma'ashelikate first, one at a time. What you gather, you have to hit 100. Likate l'maiser sheni. Achi yashlam until you hit in my example 100. Then you keep on picking up the rest of the coins. Now, if you gather all of the 200 coins, Shalom al Yisrael, but at least you know which one is which. How do you know which one is which? Maybe you got the wrong ones. V'hashar chulin. So says the Mara Fulda, 9 lines from the bottom. V'hashar chulin, ache yashlum demei meiser, v'yitna, v'yoymar, v'yisna, I'm sorry. Yeah, then, in other words, you have to make a stipulation. Yeah, you have to go through the step. What do you say? Im kol masheli kadeti he mois meiser. If punkt what I picked up was taka meiser sheni, zum gesund, mutev. The im lav, if maybe what I picked up had some chulin, oisam shol meiser, the ones that were meiser, shenisharu, yiyo mechulalim alelu, the ones that I didn't pick up should be mechulal on these. So you have to make that statement. But the point is that you cannot give some of the loss, you cannot assign any of the loss to the Meiser Sheni. You cannot do that. If you pick them up one at a time. Now the word belila means mixed. This is a key word. So really when I said in not bila means you mixed it and now you scooped it up. Scooping it up means not one at a time, many at a time. Now what's the one or many? It's not so simple. Because one simple way of reading the Mishnah, that's already for tomorrow, is that in the first case of the Mishnah, it wasn't mixed. Here you mixed it. What's the difference whether you mixed it or not? So throughout Shas, we have yesh bila, ein bila. Yesh bila means is that when things that are different are mixed together, do we say that they are evenly blended? What would be here evenly blended? to 1/3 to 2/3. And based on the rule that yesh bila, then I can argue if you picked up 270, so there's 30 coins that are missing. I can say that the same ratio that I had before it dropped, if it got mixed evenly, the same ratio that from the 30 coins I'm missing, 20 of them were chulin, but at least 10 coins are Ma'aser Sheni. Now you have to do the same step of the manafulda. You can't just go and use it. You have to say, because you don't know which one is which. But what you get to do is to take 90 coins, not 100, 90 coins, and to make a declaration. Whichever coins were Ma'aser Sheni is Shengut, and whichever other coins in the 90 were chulin, so the other coins should be mechulul on these coins. But you only need to designate 90 coins for Ma'aser Sheni. You get at least to assign some of the laws. That's the second case in the Mishnah. Then balol v'chafan, that's lefi cheshbon. You do it proportionately, and we're just going to read the top line of Daf Yud Ches. Zajac. This is the rule. Ha mislaktin. If you pick them up one at a time, we're going to go with you didn't previously mix them. Then all of what you picked up has to be l'ma'aser sheni. No loss is allowed to be assigned to ma'aser sheni. But the ha nivlolim, once you mixed it, yesh bila, evenly distributed, I'm allowed to get away with assigning some lefi cheshbon. What did the Mishnah add by saying zaklal? So the Rashi Ilya on the top says beautiful, because the Mishnah spoke about money. What would be the case if it's not money? What happens if you have the actual product? That's what the zaklal is. Zaklal l'rab is kitniyos. You have kitniyos of chulin. Just as things, you have grains, legumes, 200 legumes chulin, 100 legumes ma'aser sheni. That's a much bigger chiddush. Why is it a much bigger chiddush? Here we go already with what Shlomo said. Because what Maraf Fulda, we're going to continue tomorrow. What the Maraf Fulda says is not so pashut. Because in Yerushalmi, you can't be poide it. So we're going to leave.